Part two, we've got two really interesting panels that I just think are going to absolutely knock your socks off. This morning was fantastic. This afternoon's going to be fantasticer. I know there's no such word, but I just made it up, so let's go with that. But I was going to host a panel, but we're going to have Alexandra Barnes, who's the Director, Infrastructure and Climate Resilience from British Expertise International. Hey, we don't muck about here. It's not just from the UK, international. So, can you welcome Alexandra to the stage? Told you 1,000 people in the room. There we go.
Thank you so much.
And on this panel this afternoon, we have got two of your members of the British Expertise International. And the first person to come up is going to be who?
Nikki.
Nikki. Okay, round of applause for Nikki.
So delighted to welcome Nikki Miles, Principal Consultant at Education Development Trust.
Excellent, thank you. I love having a co-presenter, do you know that? It makes my job so much easier.
Great?
So much easier. And who's coming up next?
And then we've got Rabi El-Fadel, CEO of Phyla.
Phyla, Rabi. Now, I wish I had hair like that. I do, you know, the colour and everything looks brilliant. That was great. And we've got Millie coming in from... Millie, Holly, Molly. And we've got Holly from ZSL. And we've also got T. Gambold as well. Thank you. Right. So, Alexandra, or should I call you Alex? Which one is it?
Whichever.
Alex, right, control this panel. I don't want people running over time. You know, if they're speaking too long, I'll be doing this, and you stop them, right? Okay? But what we're looking for here is some real meaty, juicy information and knowledge that we can all learn from. Can you do that?
I think we can.
Brilliant. There we go. Off to you.
Thank you so much. And it's a great pleasure to be invited today, and welcome to all of our panel. So I chair the climate program at British Expertise International, and actually I used to lead the education program before that, so this is a topic very much close to my heart, as of course it is for our panel. And rather than read out any bios today, I think what we would do instead actually is just by way of introduction, if I could ask each of our speakers to share how your organization supports long-term regenerative solutions through education to create positive impacts for the society and the environment. There is a mic there with T, so why don't you make a start? I think we'll bring that one back.
Perfect. Hi, I'm T. Ganbold. I'm the founder and CEO of Improvability AI. What we do is automate report writing. The reason why we're doing it is because every organization is swamped with bureaucracy, swamped with reporting for regulators, for investors. Everyone has a boss. Everyone has to report to some sort of boss. And what we're doing is helping automate that with generative AI. The issue at the moment is that everyone is reinventing the wheel. Mark, we were just chatting a moment ago. Every foundation, every organization that's trying to regenerate society is reinventing bureaucracy. So it actually becomes incredibly inefficient, whereas if you're a private organization, and let's say the oil sector is very efficient, bunch of engineers, they have automated out every possible task you can imagine because they're engineers. So what we're doing is helping organizations, companies, both private or public, to get more efficient. And the only way today is with generative AI, because it brings together a lot of knowledge in one place. It autofills, a bit like ChatGPT, you know, how it helps you write. We help write for organizations. As long as you have the evidence, we help write that. So today I'm going to be talking about the power of generative AI in our field.
My name's Holly Bestley, and I am the ZSL Careers and Youth Coordinator. ZSL, for those who are not aware, we are the international conservation charity. London Zoo is part of our work, along with Whipsnade Zoo, but we are an organisation with a vision to create a world where wildlife thrives. And I work within the conservation education team within that. So within our strategy, we are aiming, the bits that the education team are focused on are strengthening safeguards for nature by creating wildlife advocates, and also creating long-term professional growth within the conservation sector by training young people and conservation professionals. So within our team, we do this in a huge number of ways. We do a lot of work in the formal education sector with school visitors to our zoos and outreach programs. That's from kind of primary all the way up to university age. We work with professionals in the formal education industry to upskill them to better engage their young people, to amplify that kind of message and better engage their young people with nature. I run specifically our careers programming in order to mainly increase access to careers for those that are underrepresented in that sector, which I'll talk a lot more about in a little bit. And then we also do a large amount of policy work on national education policy to try and kind of empower teachers and young people to put nature at the heart of the curriculum. There's a lot of other amazing educational work that goes on more widely within ZSL, particularly within our specific conservation field program teams, upskilling in-country conservationists and sharing that knowledge. But we do support that work, but it's not the main focus of what we do.
Thank you. I'm going to be briefer than that. Yeah, my name is Rabi Al-Fadel, the co-founder and CEO of Phyla. The company Phyla, we are into regeneration and work on biodiversity. We set up the company about 4 or 5 years ago. We are 5 co-founders. All of us, we come from a different sort of background linked to sustainability. So personally, I was in the sustainability for, goodness me, a long time ago. I started my career with designing wind turbines, then go to greening the construction industries, and then eventually ended up with biodiversity and building up sort of the Great Green Wall in Africa and elsewhere. Our link to education is when you go into biodiversity and regeneration, you found out, like every single topic, is you need to invest a lot in educating the community on different levels. You educate them in terms of understanding the market, in understanding the soil, understanding the financial differences between different places, their capacity themselves, and how to build up from that. And you set up a program for that. Now, in as much as we are private sector, one of our co-founders used to be a professor in INSEAD, Dr. Ben War. So at the heart of the company, we are developing a lot of sort of framework and programs for us to enhance the community engagement. And luckily, we are working in India, we are working in Zambia, in Nigeria. I came about a week, 10 days ago. We are working in Latin America, and of course, we are here. So that variety is giving us a great understanding to how to redefine certain things and engage south, north, and south, south, and north, north. I will leave it to that. There's much more to talk about.
Thank you. I'm Nikki Miles. I'm a principal consultant at EDT, Education Development Trust, and I work in the research and consultancy team. And part of our work is very research focused. Our public research looks into the impacts of various different levers on education, and specifically on the impact of climate change on education, not just for education, so thinking about curriculums and how we can motivate and enhance learners' experience of climate change education to encourage them and prepare them for the future, but also the impact of climate change on education. So what happens when the school is flooded, what happens when the school is blown away, and the impact of that on not just the lives of the students, but actually the wider community in the village. The other role that I have in the R&C team is to work with governments across our SSA region, our MENA and Brunei regions, to think from a very top level system strengthening about what education needs to look like to be sustainable for the future in the country, all the way down to classroom level, supporting and developing teachers, school leaders, and the community to really focus on the importance of education and the value of education and what that can do to support the community in the future sustainably.
Thank you so much, everybody. And I should mention the reason that, international was a little bit mentioned by a couple of the speakers today. The organization I work for basically supports organizations like EDT and Phyla, but many, many others, in working in emerging and developing markets. And we're constantly looking at some of these key intersections. So today's topic, actually, conservation, democracy, and climate change. When all of you were thinking about the topic, what are some of those key intersectional issues that came to mind? And do you have perhaps an example from some of your previous experience that you might like to share? And perhaps we'll start with Nikki, if you don't mind.
I've got the mic, that's not a problem. So I think when the question was posed and the event was put forward, the first thing that struck me was actually the interlinkage, especially if we're looking internationally, for me, is poverty. Because for some people today, right now, the world is not burning. Their family needs feeding, or they need a roof over their head. And to educate everybody and say, the world is burning, you need to fix it, young people, it's on you to do, actually isn't helpful. What we need to do is find solutions. We need to work with government, with stakeholders and partners to find a solution that doesn't always put the blame on the minority, on the poorest of the poor. We need to think about how we can help them sustainably move forward, to practically move forward, to be safe, but also to be innovative and curious, to think about what's relevant in their local context and how a local solution can have a more national and wider contribution to a bigger picture. So we need to think with a lens of from the bottom up, but also from the top down, I think is what strikes me the most.
Absolutely, that systems thinking, really. Rabi, please go ahead.
Yes. Singularity is the biggest mistake that we made before in thinking. So it's the multidimensional thinking is always going to be now the next generation's sort of task and what they have to do. I don't think there's anything that is not linked. Now, how to link it and how to prioritize your steps towards the linkage is something maybe we have to think about. So at the minute we said conservation, democracy, and climate change, in my mind, they are immediately linked. Now, how they are linked is to understand the reason of each and every one of them while we are trying to conserve. What does it mean to have a democracy? What does it mean to respond, to mitigate, and to adapt to the climate change? And all down to an understanding and knowledge in line with this very one. So if you look at the common denominator, I will draw back to some example that I have in my career. Before I was Phyla, I was part of a team working on the Crystal Palace Park. And as simple as it is, it's nothing to do with a large conservation. It has dinosaurs, but they are. I don't know if you guys know Crystal Palace Park very well, but the thing is suddenly for the park to be managed, to be regenerated, and the landscape to flourish, we had to read the differences in the park, the connection between the community around it, where we can sell a piece of land to make sure the landscape is being flourished, how we're going to create the water moving between the top and the bottom of that park, how we can create, I don't know if whoever is old enough to see that one of the two towers I was designing, they called it Crystal Palace Park is towering again on the energy towers there. And the tower we were putting in, talking about the correlation, was to find a nodes to correlate, and the towers were designed, but stayed as designed, never been materialized, is energy from wind, solar, and biomass from the waste of the park, and making sure it's working 24 hours, and making sure that the energy of that fed into the community that's coming to the park, feeding into the Olympic sort of. But that was a design, detailed design, never materialized. But you always can find something that connect everything together and make sure it's part, again, it's part of a circular economy to attract people's attention. But there are much more than that, everyone. The locality of the place is crucial. So you need to understand where you are, who you're dealing with, and you map all this and find a common denominator. And the last, I would say, when I talk about democracy, you'll be shocked and amazed when you allow a community to be recognized and to have a voice, how much energy you can take out of them and make sure they will be playing a big role in conservation, and they will be definitely alerted to climate change and able to adapt and to mitigate.
Thank you. When I was thinking about conservation and democracy from my own kind of expertise, the main thing that came to my mind is that the conservation sector itself cannot be truly democratic because there is not equitable access to people to take part in that sector or in that work. So a large part of what we do and what I do within my conservation programming is looking at who are the voices that are missing from the conservation sector. There's a study done in 2017 that looked at kind of the ethnic diversity of different sectors within the UK specifically, and we are the second least diverse ethnically after farming. And so a lot of our work over the last sort of 5 years has been to identify who are the barrier, who are the people that whose voices are missing from this work that we're doing, internationally as an organisation. Why are they missing? What are the barriers they're facing to getting involved in conservation? And how can we break those down? So we have programmes here at ZSL in order to try and kind of build pathways into conservation. We know those barriers within the UK. Those barriers are a lack of awareness of the diversity of different types of jobs getting involved in this sector. They don't know that, there's a kind of traditional thought of a conservationist as someone out in the field studying animals and then, making change. But there are so many skills that are valuable to this sector from law, from sociology, from psychology. There are jobs that work with people. Well, we know that people are central to conservation, given that they're central to the challenges that the world is facing. There are so many ways of people working for wildlife that's one thing we try and combat. Another is that our sector still relies on unpaid experience to get into it. Lots of entry-level jobs in our sector are not truly entry-level. They ask for kind of quite unreasonable, specific technical skills. And we know that there are other barriers that many groups are facing. So we as an organisation are trying to combat those so that we can create a stronger, more diverse organisation at ZSL, but sector more broadly. We talk a lot, we know that what we're striving for around the world is biodiversity, because diverse ecosystems are resilient to change, like climate change. And we as an organisation and as a sector are not acting on that. We are not a diverse sector, so we are not resilient to the challenges that we're going to face moving forwards. So that's what kind of struck me about the theme that you brought up today.
Hello. I want to highlight that this year there are going to be more elections than any time in history. It's a very, very scary year. But it's also a year where we're seeing a lot of data on social media. For example, TikTok. The younger generation is engaged in conservation or sustainability, environmental topics. And we have seen that actually elections can be persuaded or move in the direction of a political leader who is thinking about green policies. We've seen that in Australia, where even Keir Starmer, he is much more green than Sunak. Sunak just put up his arms and gave up. That's why people have completely, I believe our generation have completely lost hope in him, because he just gave up on a topic we all care about. And then in the US, there is, of course, Biden and the Inflation Reduction Act, which gives $365 billion to businesses, and businesses across Europe are moving to America to access these grants to help society become more green and more sustainable. The challenge is that in America, the immigration problem has taken front and center stage. But imagine the planet heating. that is going to cause more immigration than any other problem on the planet. Look at Europe, they're frightened because of the immigration problem. The immigration problem is linked directly to a heating planet. So now I think political leaders and anyone who is engaged in this topic need to directly correlate the two, and we need more social media influencers, those who can influence quite a lot, to connect these two very obvious topics. So immigration and climate change, and our role in it is to eradicate so much paperwork because you get nothing done. Writing paper, like reports and paperwork, means you actually do not go and do things. So.
Thank you. Sorry, would you mind passing that microphone just there for? Thank you. It'll be back in a moment. Thank you so much for all of those answers. And gosh, there's so much in there. You know, the power of data, how actually, you know, if we think about the poverty and the associated issues there, maybe that's what we should be solving first. Conservation can't be democratic, something else that I wrote down, and that idea from Holly that, you know, actually all of us, to be resilient, we need to be diverse. Thank you so much for all of those. I thought next it would be really interesting to go into the theme that I think all of you have mentioned in one way or another, which is partnerships. You know, when we think of the Sustainable Development Goals, Goal 17, I think everybody agrees that it's important, so Goal 17 is indeed partnership. And when you think of the importance of partnership in terms of progressing climate adaptation, conservation, and of course biodiversity restoration, what are some of the essential components? Who are some of the essential stakeholders? And why haven't we achieved SDG 17 yet? What are some of those barriers? And I think I will go to Holly first on that one. Thanks.
I already have the mic. The first thing that comes, the kind of key thing that comes to my mind, and reflecting what other people have been saying as well, is that we've been talking about the word education quite a lot, and I actually don't think it's always the right word to be using in this context, because it's engagement. It's a two-way process. It's not that we need to educate the world, it's that we need to include the world in every piece of work that we are doing to combat those challenges and these crises. And it's all about putting the communities and the groups that you are working with, in putting their voice at the center of any work that is done. It's something that we've been striving to do within the conservation education team at ZSL. It's in the way we approach things, is that who is the audience, and how can we put their voices in the centre of the development of this within our community engagement programming, within our school partnerships. As a simple example, we have local schools on partnership schemes, and the teachers are at the very centre of that planning of how we work with them to engage their students. The thing I'm most proud of, I think, in the way that ZSL is striving forward in this area, is our youth advisory board, which was set up last year, that is bringing diverse voices from across the UK right into the centre of the organisation and up to the highest level, advising our executive committee and our council of trustees on what and how they should be hearing the voices of young people and embedding them into the work that the organisation chooses to do. But I think that thinking about engagement and those community voices is so vital in any partnership that we do within this sector.
Inclusion, not education. I love it. Nikki, would you mind going next? I think that will go quite nicely. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, so for me, I think partnerships needs to work. Again, I mentioned, I'll reflect back on my previous answer about that bottom level up and also top level down. So in our research, we found a gentleman in one of the regions of Kenya who was protecting and working with an organisation to protect the mangrove swamps. And the partnership there originally didn't work because he was trying to convince the local people and the local villagers that they needed to protect the mangroves. They needed to stay as they were, not to be cut down. But obviously there was tension there because the local village community needed the mangroves not just for their own fuel, but also to boost their economy and their economic well-being. And that's where I think partnership is a real balance between education, and Holly, you also mentioned about that engagement. So thinking about educating or engaging with the community chopping the tree down today isn't going to safeguard and sustain your future. Yes, you will have fuel. Yes, you will have income today. But what does that look like in the next 5 years, in the next 10 years? And so the importance really of partnership is to be able to open partnerships up to listen to each other, not to drop somebody in, a stakeholder in, or a goodwill partner who's going to fix an area regardless of what the local economy or the local community need, but actually to work together and to listen carefully to the community so that they are engaged, but they also understand the importance of moving forward and what that would look like. There's more examples, but I'll pause there to give other people a chance.
I really love that, creating a balance by listening to each other, Rabi, please do go ahead next. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I remember the first time I was peer reviewing the SDG first draft sent to me by the United Nations panels, and I was going through every single goals, and the last one, SDG 17, I put in notes still there. I called it the Connect Tom. That is a key to the SDG 17, and there was a struggle to really to identify the indicators, the key indicators that will allow to see exactly what they are. Of course, there is the financial transactions between different governments. There's the internal transactions that's going in, but transacting to where is the essential services, of course, the sustainability or development, whichever way and form. So to choose what and where to take it from where to where. And again, there is the innovation and technology transfer. What is missing to a certain extent is the wisdom transfer. There is an intelligence, there is a know-how, but there's a lack of wisdom transfer that you need to capture. And there are a few other sort of indicators. Now, in terms of the stakeholders into that, of course, by the time you mentioned those indicators, is going to be governments, between the South and South. Financial entities, you have communities, you have organizations. The United Nations in particular, they have 2 or 3 organizations very much into enhancing that. So a number of players, but the main player, I remember I had a visit to a northern part of Nigeria, and part of the discussion was about how to stop people to cut trees, as if cutting trees was the main reason of the climate change. It wasn't, of course. But when I was visiting the villages, talking about the transaction, to have a transaction, you need to identify the differences and allow for what we say in French, vase communicant. And then you have the differences transacting between each other and know which one to open and when to open it up. And between the villages, funny enough, they knew what they have and they know what they want to sell. And there's another village not far from there, they want something different. So open up those gateways is a very, very key. And this is what takes me back to how to identify the connectom and allow for this to start really to exchange. That is a key. And I think that is, if you look at what we do in Phyla, is to study carefully every single DNA of whatever place you are in, to identify the different capitals. It's not just financial, is human resources, is nature resources, is intellectual capital that does exist that you have to uncover. And nature resource or capitals as well you need to see. But there is as well manufactured capitals that you need to identify. The minute you map and you identify, you start to open up the channels and take it further. Then how to prioritize that and keep the dignity between the community and not feeling that they are indebted for what, in fact, we are indebted towards them. I keep on focusing on the rural area because for me, is the blueprint of the next, I would say, future is going to be over lands where the rural areas, they are there. So this is the biggest, I would say, playground for us. And this is where we need to identify how we're going to exchange and have that connectome of SDG 17.
Thank you. And T, of course, your organization is at the forefront of removing barriers, democratic, making things more democratic by removing the bureaucratic, right? So from your point of view, how do you feel partnerships can be created most effectively?
So I always like to think globally, and I look at international organizations as a student of international relations. Look at OPEC. It is the most powerful organization on the planet. It controls the entire oil price. They are an incredibly efficient partnership. It is a well-architected organization. It has partners that want to maintain let's say, a flow of energy and a commodity that is used in all our products globally. OPEC is a very organized example of when partnerships work. What is lacking right now in those who want to do amazing things, positive, and shift our dependence on oil and shift to alternatives, is just a very much lack of coordination. I see it because everyone is in the weeds and reinventing every wheel under the sun. So there is no comparative to OPEC on the global partnership scale. COP tries, but really the lack of coordination and the inefficiency is what I see. And I think my generation will step in and look at every inefficiency, cut it out, and do a better job. We are going through a very tough time, but it takes tough moments in history for other leaders to emerge and say, we need to get out all these inefficient cycles, get out the inefficient processes, and actually do something about it. So I propose a world where we have an alternative to OPEC, and that is organized, efficient, leveraging the greatest technologies out there. And it's going to be a lot of work. People like Bill Gates are, of course, leading in that. But I do think we're going to require leaders that we might not have right now.
But of course, some of those technological solutions really help democratize things and provide access to potentially more people at a micro level to be able to do these things more locally. And I've got one more question prepared for the panel, and then I would love a couple from the floor. So please do get ready for a couple of questions. But just on that note, could you speak to some of the co-benefits of building capacity for locally led climate adaptation in particular? And I'd love to start with Rabi, if that's okay.
Yeah, I think I mentioned one thing. The focus has to be, again, I go back to the underserved community in particular, is the focus should be continuously be building up intellectual capital. I'll give you an example of something I've done years ago. We were in West Africa dealing with a village that 950 people inside it. They didn't have water. The kids, they used to go early morning to go and pick up water from one of these long, faraway ponds, come back home, very tired, and they go to school. The school hasn't been built yet properly. They go to school, most of them sleeping. And they want to have a solution to this. They didn't have money even for the borehole. And then what we did, we designed a rainwater harvesting over every single sort of little bit huts. But we taught them how to do it. At the same time, we had the collection at large over the school. But we didn't stop there. So of course the kids now, they're having more water. They've learned, I mean, even the female community there, they knew how to put the roofs properly, the pipes properly, the butts, and how to conserve it. And free the kids from that harsh sort of work. But we didn't stop there. We said we're going to give machines for them to be able to do that and to sell it to other villages and make sure that the other village would give them something different. Now, kids, they were not anymore, I mean, there were about 270 kids, actually. They didn't go anymore in the morning, they were going straight away to school and all. And they were quite healthy. It felt much, much better. But the key to this is to build up an intellectual capital for them to be able to sell, and rather than to stop on a solution, not take it deeper and have that sort of deep knowledge. At the same time, there's something else we are doing in Zambia where we're engaging schools, about 120 schools to start with, where they have each and every one, they have a piece of land, and we started this sort of, we are designing something where they will be part of regenerative agroforestry plantation, and they knew the tree from day one, how to plant it, how to coordinate certain things, and make sure that it's becoming part of their pension scheme in the future. But it's A, you need to tackle which generation, and then B, you have to really enhance the intellectual capital at deep.
And essentially, you're actually pretty much building a local business model in that case. And then you are building resilience and true sustainability, because it's financial sustainability, not just environmental. Nikki, please, next. Thank you.
I think we've seen through our research the importance of building up that intellectual capital as well. Thinking about flood risk management strategies, so making certain that the local solution is empowered by local people, but also then educating them as to what that means at a more regional and national level and the role that they play in that. So it starts really small with the flood risk management scheme, and they go to the schools and they place a coloured flag in the school. And it's a responsibility then of the young people in the school to go back to their villages, to tell their families and the villagers what the flood risk is. But it doesn't stop there. Through education schemes, the children are then given the empowerment to say what strategies, what mitigation, what care and attention the village should be putting in place. This is the risk. The flag is this colour. These are the things we can do now to limit the damage, to protect ourselves, to prepare. But then when the risk changes and subsides, it's also about educating to say, what can we do to prevent that risk, that flag being placed here again? What does that look like? What role do I play in it? But what role do I play in the regional strategy to flood risk management? And what role does that play in our national strategy? And where's my voice in that? If we're going to take things away from the most poor and vulnerable in society at the moment, we need to give them something back. We can't just keep taking away. So if we're going to take away charcoal burning, for example, what do we replace that with to change that behaviour? And most of that comes from knowledge and empowerment. And I think when you find that balance, when you understand the balance between a national programme can't do to the people at the very lowest level, but the people at the very lowest level can input to and make a difference to the national level, having that voice, having that education be heard is really important.
Absolutely. Oh, gosh. Okay, we've got 4 minutes. I'd love some responses to these from you, if you don't mind. And yeah, T, did you want to make a start? And then we'll go with Holly. And then maybe one question, if we can squeeze it in.
I'll keep it very short. Mine is that we need the media. So Mark Galvin, who's the producer, is here. And so I don't know if you guys are watching Diddley Squat. Yeah. So that's Jeremy Clarkson. He is now the nation's greatest conservational educator. I have learned, literally, my stepbrother has a dairy farm, and I have not learned as much from him than I have learned from Jeremy Clarkson. Because before I didn't know what to ask. Jeremy Clarkson makes it entertaining. He makes us feel he makes the viewer realize that we do not know anything about where our environment is going, how to protect our land, what the farmers actually do, what conservationists do, the art of it. So I think we need entertainment. We need less, I would say, the people who lecture us to stand off stage and put the entertaining people on. Because that literally, that connects with humans much more. It makes us feel vulnerable. It makes us realize we don't know. And that is positive. We do need to realize what we don't know to actually do something about it. So I think more Jeremy Clarksons, laughing at themselves, making mistakes, and connecting with humans.
And of course, there's just something to be said for information in all sorts of modes and through all the sources. And I think that's something that Nikki was referring to as well. It's, actually the child bringing some of that information home, or the teenager watching it on TikTok, or, perhaps, somebody watching Jeremy Clarkson's podcast as well. Holly.
Just thinking about bringing that kind of idea of intellectual capital and kind of local conservation need back to the UK, and very aware that in the next the next couple of decades up to 2050, we are in the face of a green skills shortage and a green skills gap, with what we need to strive for the net zero targets that we are moving towards, within the sort of green sectors that will be responsible for that, so within construction, within waste management, and all of those sectors, but also all jobs are going to become green jobs. We are all going to be needing to strive for sustainability within whatever work the young people move into in the future. And so I think that a focus on sort of embedding a better understanding of what those green skills are. There's been studies that have shown that young people in the UK they definitely really care about the environment, and they have reported that the sustainability of a company will influence where they choose to go and work, but that doesn't translate to young people wanting to do the jobs that are actually required for those net zero targets. And so I think that that's a really that will need to be a really strong focus area for local conservation in the UK, is on upskilling young people to understand green skills, understand the need of them, and understand that it's a very lucrative area where they can earn a lot of money, unlike more traditional nature-based careers. So that's sort of my thought on local conservation.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And I believe we have unfortunately run out of time.
I'm going to give you one question.
Yes?
Just one question.
One question. Wow. Somebody gets to ask one question. Who would like to be the one asking the question?
Look at that, we finished on time. I am that good. There we go. Listen, thank you very much, panel. Thank you very much, Alex. It's been wonderful. Great to hear from you. Brilliant.